Welcome back, fellow Puckleheads, as you join us here today. Me and Marcus White, back as always, ready for another NHL season just around the corner. Training camp full flight. Preseason's already going. I've already been to a preseason game because that's how much of a hockey addict I am. Today we will break down. We're going to have probably 4 shows here. It looks like we're going to go division by division. And we decided to start with a neutral division that has no rooting interest and a part to us, just so we could be biased at the end of this. You know, you could think we're actually know what we're talking about to start this. We'll start with the central division today. I think a lot of excitement from this division, Marcus. They were strong last year with 5 teams in. What do you think so far of the Central Division going into the year?
Even with some of the flaws on some of these teams, I think you could make the argument that this is the best division in hockey. I think you had 2 teams that were really bad last year in Winnipeg and Colorado that I do not think are going to be nearly as bad this year, given some personnel changes both behind the bench and on the ice. We'll get into that. There's some big personalities missing from the division. Both behind the bench and on the ice. David Backes gone in Boston. And among some other stars, including stars as in actually on the Dallas Stars, not actual stars in the NHL, but Jason Demers, Alex Goligoski also gone from the division. And Patrick Waugh gone, unfortunately. Everyone's favorite crazy NHL coach is gone. But I think this is a very good division. I think I could see it shaping out a certain way, but I also wouldn't be surprised if some of these young teams make a push here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I think it's definitely got potential. It might have been last year, and you could certainly make the argument again. This might be the deepest division in hockey. Like you said, sending 5 teams to the playoffs last year in Chicago, Dallas, Minnesota, St. Louis, and I'm just blanking on, and Nashville, my favorite.
Yeah.
So Nashville as well there. So I think in all likelihood, we'll probably see a similar core strength there. As we said, we just brought those teams up. So here we're going to give our predictions in a second, but just a little hindsight from last season. Dallas finished first in that division last year, Marcus, 109 points. There was a good competition for first in this division last year. Dallas with 109 points, having 50 wins there. A plus 37 goal differential. St. Louis only 2 points behind them last year, 107 points, 49 wins, a plus 23 goal differential. And Chicago was in it there for a while too, finished 6 points back with 103 points, 47 wins, plus 26. So good competition to start it. Nashville then finished 4th. Of course, lost in the second round to the Sharks. Had a good series there. 96 points, 41 wins, plus 13. And then Minnesota squeaked in there, had a rough middle patch of the season, which they always seem to have. They always have that lull in December and January they've done the last few years.
The Mike Yeo special.
Yeah, exactly. The Mike Yeo special with 87 points, 38 wins, only a plus 10 goal differential. And then missing the playoffs, of course, Colorado with 82 points, who surprisingly stayed in it for a little bit longer than I think most people would have expected. And then Winnipeg closing it out as the caboose with a measly 78 points. Not a good year for the Peg, absolutely. Marcus, can you see any changes coming here, or do we think it's going to be a similar and who's going to be the top, who's going to be the bottom in this division?
I think we're going to have 5 teams make the playoffs again. I think the order will change, but I think it's the same 5 teams. I would not be surprised, though, if Colorado and Winnipeg make pushes here, because I think Winnipeg – has some intriguing pieces if they can figure out this Trouba thing. And if they get good goaltending, which, Connor Hellebuyck's right there, whether or not they start him remains to be seen. But if they can get good goaltending, I can see them making a push. And I think Colorado is just going to be improved by not having Patrick Waugh. I mean, I'm already reading quotes from Gabriel Landeskog that they're going to spend less time in their defensive zone. And that's a change that everybody's looking forward to on the team. And you see the talent they have on their roster, especially up front, and they have, arguably one of the league's best defensemen in Tyson Barrie. I think Colorado could make a push too, but I think ultimately it's going to be the same 5 teams that made the playoffs last season that make it this season.
Yep, I'm with you on that one. So as we get going here, Marcus, we'll start with number 7 in the division for our predictions this year. I'm with you. It's either going to be the Jets or Avalanche. I think it's going to be Winnipeg this year again. Honestly, they probably got worse losing Andrew Ladd. Now, for the future's sake, they were right not to sign him to that contract. Not a lot going on there. They got some youth in Winnipeg. I think this is kind of a start of an overhaul, and I hope the fans are patient there because I think in the future they could have something. We get to see Patrick Lane this year. Hopefully will be on the roster. Nikolai Ehlers from the year before in the draft is a good player there. But and we'll see what happens with the Jacob Trouba situation. That's a little dicey. Maybe we'll touch on that at the end of the show. Marcus, another year older for a guy like Dustin Byfuglien, who we're a fan of, but I don't know if he can necessarily carry that load. They got Brian Little, who I'm a big fan of up front, but I just don't see this as a very deep team, Marcus, and their goaltending is still something we're not sure. I mean, if Ondrej Pavelec plays, we've talked about him before, is arguably the worst starting goalie in hockey. We'll see if Hellebuyck is maybe able to crack the NHL roster this year. Obviously, you have Hutchinson there blocking the way a little bit. I just don't see this as a very deep team. And honestly, not necessarily that they're terrible, and I think they're going to be young and have some more speed this year. I just think the strength of the division is going to beat up on them in the long run.
And I think that's what's going to keep them out of the playoffs this year, too. I'm looking at last year's leaders in score and venue adjusted puck possession, and Winnipeg surprisingly was in the top half of the league in that statistic. I think, this is a team that's been as let down by goaltending as any other team in recent memory. I don't think Ondrej Pavelic's the answer, and I think the sooner Winnipeg gives up on that and, gives the reins to Connor Hellebuyck, I think they're really going to make some strides. I think you could argue that they might have brought in the best player of any team in the division this offseason by drafting Patrick Laine. Certainly in terms of potential, they made the biggest addition of any team in that division. Whether or not Laine pays immediate dividends this season, it's hard to say. And he didn't score at the World Cup of Hockey, but he looked good. He was the MVP at the World Championships playing against, playing against men as a 17, 18-year-old, dominated the World Juniors. I think they're going to be an exciting team. And, they've got Ehlers coming up. Marco Dano, who they acquired in exchange for Andrew Ladd, is another kind of intriguing young piece.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the pieces they have.
I do too.
Hanging over them is Trouba. If they can get Trouba back, it's hard to beat their defensive depth, especially if Trouba is used in a top four role as opposed to Tyler Myers, who, by a lot of measures, Trouba is, I think, a better defenseman than Tyler Myers. We'll see what happens with them, but I really like Winnipeg's future here. This is a challenging division, but I don't think this is going to be as long of a rebuild as may have been previously anticipated. I think they were a little fortunate to get second in the lottery and get Laine. They didn't get Austin Matthews, but Laine is a pretty good second choice. So I think they're going to have a good year. They're not going to be great. I think they'll be better than they were last year, and the sooner they go to Hellebuyck, I think the sooner they'll challenge for a playoff spot.
Yeah, exactly. It's just more or less, like I said, not necessarily it's a terrible team. I just think this division is too strong for them right now. And I think they've done a good job of assembling some young talent. So I think once they move forward with their goaltender of the future, who in all likelihood is going to be Connor Hellebuyck, honestly, I think they're better off. I think it's somehow dump Pavelec and just kind of let Hellebuyck, especially if the season, Marcus, is kind of already coming to a turn by early December. I think it's time to kind of take that page, and you might as well let him get some reps. I think it's only going to benefit him in the long run. As we move on here, so we had the Jets finishing seventh. Not that they're a terrible team, but it's just the way it is. We talked about a team that might have a slight improvement from this year, and a lot of it having to do behind the bench. The Colorado Avalanche, having them finish sixth, Marcus. Once again, we always talk about the Avalanche's top-end talent. I mean, Landeskog, McKinnon, and Duchesne, I mean, that is as good as a lineup to build your team around as there is in the NHL. After that, it certainly falls off a bit. I think their defensive depth is still a liability and an issue. Their goaltending has been inconsistent over the last year or so. Varlamov did not have a good year last year. But they still got a guy like Tyson Barrie back there. They need to ride him like the stallion he is, and they kind of see where it goes from there. You see them making more of a push maybe than I do. Why do you feel that way, Marcus?
I just think not having Patrick Waugh is going to help them substantially. Patrick Waugh is one of the great players in NHL history, but it's hard to argue that a coach did less with more than Patrick Waugh did in Colorado. I think a big reason why they, in spite of their possession metrics, were able to hang around is because of the top end talent that they had. Like you said, I think their top 6 forwards, you could argue that's as appealing as any groups in the league.
Sure,
I think
sure.
there's more, maybe some better groups, maybe some older, more experienced groups, but certainly for the future, I mean, Landeskog, McKinnon, and Duchesne is as good as it gets to build around up front. And they're just not going to be as bad as they were last year. I mean, you're looking at when they had Patrick Waugh, they were among the league leaders in shots allowed. They ceded puck possession. They played almost entirely in their defensive end. And, the guy they hired, Jared Bednar, I believe his name is, he was the head coach of the Lake Erie Monsters last year that won the Calder Cup. They're going to play a puck possession style. Whether or not they have the horses to do it, that remains to be seen. But we saw last year the Toronto Maple Leafs, just by having Mike Babcock, there wasn't that same influence at the end as there was on points, as there was on puck possession, but they were among the most improved teams in the league in puck possession after playing under a notoriously bad puck possession coach in Randy Carlyle, who has won a Stanley Cup, but just doesn't, his teams have ceded possession for years. I don't think Bender's going to have the same impact that Mike Babcock did, but I think this roster is better than the one that the Toronto Maple Leafs had last year. And if they can get Varlamov to bounce back and they're not spending as much time in their own end, I think they could make a push. Now, I think what stands in their way is they're in kind of a weird situation now. Even though they're probably going to miss the playoffs, they have some of the least amount of salary cap space in the league. They have even less salary cap space than Chicago does, which is kind of crazy to think about. I think they're going to need to be sellers this year. They should not. If the worst thing that could happen to Colorado is like they did with Joe Sacco and like they did with Patrick Roy, they falsely believe that a playoff appearance in the first season of the coach means that they're already on the cusp, that they could already make it. That's the worst thing that could happen to them. I think they definitely need to take a step back and make some trades. I mean, but there's going to be some tough contracts to move. Francois Beauchemin has 4.5 million for 2 more years left on his deal. No movement clause as well. I like Barry. I like Johnson, but I think on an ideal team, they're probably your number 1 and your number 4, Barry being your number 1, Johnson being your number 4, but probably will have to be the number 1 and number 2, if not the number 2 and 3 in Colorado. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't think Varlamov can be worse than he was last year. I don't have his stats pulled in front of me, but I know he had a career worst, one of the worst years of his career. I see a team with a lot of talent, and I think they're going to be able to make a push by playing this better system, but I don't think it's going to lead. And if it does, it'd be great to make the playoffs. But like I said, that's probably the worst thing that could happen to this team.
Yeah, by the way, Varlamov's numbers this past year, I mean, he was only played 57 games, 914 save percentage, 281 goals against. In today's NHL, frankly, it doesn't cut it. It's just you need a 920 goalie for sure. And Colorado's team hemorrhages a lot of shots, obviously, and Varlamov had other issues and whatnot. So you hope he can get back to where he was. I mean, in 13-14, when we went to the playoffs, he had a 927. He basically stole a playoff berth for that team. So if he can get back to that level, like you said, a good goalie, get things hot. But I'm with you. I actually think if they make the playoffs, it'll hurt them in the long run more than it'll help them, Marcus. So that once again there, the Jets at 7, kind of rebuild and retool. And Avs improvement at 6 there. Next up, Marcus at 5. I got the St. Louis Blues. I think they're really just going to take a step back. And I've always wanted the Blues to have success. They just were that team who could never get over the hump. Unfortunately, they ran into some good Blackhawks teams there a couple years in a row. Losing David Backes is big. We talk about Brian Elliott, who I agree with you, as we talked before the show, has been pretty underrated in his career. Jake Allen, who they want to be the goalie of the future. I don't blame them, but as I still think yet to prove himself as an established NHL goalie, that could be a shaky issue. Kevin Shattenkirk's contract's coming up. Do they wind up moving him? They also lose a guy like Troy Brouwer as well. Lose some good depth pieces in there. I do think they'll slide into the playoffs as a wild card team, but I can't see them finishing any higher than 5th in this division.
Yeah, I think the Elliott loss is as big as any. I think Backus a bit on the downswing of his career, and I'm really not. I'm not sure where the Vladimir Sobotka situation stands. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to come over. But they do have some young offensive pieces, and I think they can make up for Backus's loss. But I think the drop off to Jake Allen from Brian Elliott is a lot bigger than people make out to be. I'm looking at Elliott's even strength save percentage, and for goalies, that's typically a better way of measuring performance because even strength save percentage is is a lot more sustainable than it is at in a shorthanded or even a power play situation where goalies save percentages fluctuate. And Jake Allen had a 927 at even strength last year. That was the highest of his career. Elliott has the same career average, but has only dropped below 925 at even strength once in the last 5 seasons. I think Elliott's track record is more proven than Allen. I'm not saying that Allen can't play at the level that Brian Elliott played last year, but there's an argument you could make that Brian Elliott was like pretty much the MVP of the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs last season.
Sure.
It was as big a reason as any that they made the conference final to begin with. I think that drop off, while they don't have the worst goaltending situation in the division, I think that drop off plus the really just bizarre situation with Ken Hitchcock and Mike Yeo, where you have the head coach in waiting and, the head coach. I know you've seen that before in college sports. We've never really seen it before in the NHL. I think it's going to be a kind of a weird situation. I'm not one to read into behind the scenes going ons and say that that's a reason why things are happening. But I do think in this case that it's going to be kind of weird. And especially with David Backus, one of their leaders, gone, I think that creates a weird situation. And I think you're just going to see a drop off in play on the ice.
I think that's a bizarre situation for a coach, Marcus. A player, you see a famous player, like whether it was, Gretzky or in the MLB this year, David Ortiz is doing it, and they had their little farewell tour. And I think that's fine because players, you could prepare for that. But as a coach, to go into a season saying, all right, guys, this is like my last run. I mean, maybe it's a rallying point for the boys trying to get your coach one if you really connect with him. Yeah, but as a coach to kind of say that this is my last year, you wonder if how you approach that as a player. Like I said, you could rally or not. It's an interesting, and you hope it's not awkward for Mike Yeo, who's going to wind up stepping up to the plate there eventually. But you're trying to contain what you respect you have for Ken Hitchcock. Interesting dynamic there. I agree. We've seen it in college sports with offensive coordinators, especially in the college football or something like that, where you see a coach there who's been there for decades and decades. St. Louis, decent team. I still like their blue line a lot. I love Colton Parenko. Man, he's a heck of a hockey player. And Alex Pietrangelo, of course. And I said Shattenkirk, will he finish the season as a Blue? We're not sure yet. That's certainly a debate that could happen. Tarasenko, just amazing. Steen, Stasny. After those three, though, Marcus, I think their scoring depth certainly drops off after those top 3 guys there. Guys like Patrick Berglund are nice little players, Laterra, David Perron, but nothing crazy down the line there for sure. And you wonder if that's going to be able to hold up with a goalie that might be, is going to be in all likelihood worse than the goalie you had last year if your offense is now going to dip off. You had a career year from Troy Brouwer, and of course, David Backus isn't what he was. But
another big loss, Brouwer.
Still a big loss. Yeah, Troy Brouwer definitely impressed last year. So we'll see how it comes down the line. I do see them sneaking into the playoffs, but I don't see them having as strong of a unit as they did last year for sure.
Yeah, and Sobotka will not be able to get out of his Continental Hockey League contract.
You're saying now? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's another big loss for them. Jordan. Yeah. Another loss.
3 days ago, it says he can't get out of his contract. So,
all right. Well,
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in St. Louis. I think the step back now, trading Shattenkirk, I would say, given what they have on their front line and what they have on the ice compared to last year, I think now is probably the time to trade him at the deadline, even if you're in contention for a playoff spot. I don't think they're a team that's going to be at the deadline, right on the precipice of a Stanley Cup and needing that extra piece to get over the top. But if they are, I don't think I'd blame them for hanging on to Shattenkirk, especially given that it is Hitchcock's last season.
Yeah, for sure. I can get that. That'll be an interesting dynamic, especially if they're like we expect them to be a borderline playoff team down the stretch and squeaking in. Will they choose to just suck it up and say, let's just get into the playoffs, or will they move Shattenkirk, who in all likelihood they can get a pretty nice haul for down in the long run there. So then the teams that would switch spots there, and then we have at the 4th spot is the Minnesota Wild. Marcus, I think they didn't do a whole lot this offseason. Of course, signing Eric Stahl to actually a reasonable contract. And I know he's on the decline in his career a bit, but not bad.
Stunningly one of the better deals of the offseason.
Yeah, I tweeted that on around July 1st. Somehow that might be one of the best deals of the day. Another year older for Zach Parise, Marcus. Another year older for Mika Koivu and Jason Pominville. After that, their units are pretty cheap down the line there. Still got Ryan Suter on the back end. We love Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Bronin, Matt Dumba. Actually, a pretty deep and young D-core back there, which I think is going to help them. Does their goaltending keep up with Devin Dubnyk, who seems to actually be a somewhat decent investment so far? I know there's been some questions of whether that contract would work out for them. I think they're slightly improved, Marcus, but I don't see them going over the top at all. I do think they're still a pretty good defensive team. They have been for the last couple of years as far as goals against and whatnot. Can Zach Parise stay healthy? I think it's a big question. Zach Parise and Mikko Koivu have been the heart and soul of that team for a couple of years now. Another year older for them. When do they start breaking down? Do they keep being sustainable? I do think they're a decent team, though. I think they're going to compete pretty hard in that division. I think they'll be in that competition for that maybe 3rd spot in the division for a little while there. And wonder another team that, honestly, if they improve their scoring depth a little bit, could be actually a little bit dangerous down the line going into the playoffs.
I think this is a team that, like Colorado, its biggest move this offseason was made behind the bench, and I don't think we can understate how important hiring Bruce Boudreau was for this team.
Yep, I forgot.
I would argue that he had Anaheim overachieving in the regular season and then, more or less playing up to their potential in the postseason. I think he's going to have a big impact on Minnesota. I have them slated at 4th right now, but I would not be surprised to see them challenge for one of the top 2 spots in the division. Nor would I be surprised to see them win the division, just because we know what kind of an impact Bruce Boudreau has on teams. I think, playoff success notwithstanding, I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. I think he's overachieved with his rosters as opposed to underachieving in the postseason. Yeah. Unfortunately, you create those higher expectations with more success, and they don't always take into account what's on the roster. But, they were a pretty good puck possession team last year. They're going to be better by having Boudreau. I love their blue line, like you said. And Devin Dubnyk quietly, didn't have as good of a year last year as he did the previous season.
Yeah.
But he was a .931 at even strength. He was a .933 at even strength the year before. What killed him last year was his shorthanded save percentage, going from .926 to .842. But like I said, not a very sustainable practice or way of measuring goalies' shorthanded save percentage. I think Minnesota is going to be good. And, if we do have them at 4th, I think they're very, very capable of upsetting whoever the top seed is.
I'm with you. I think they're a dangerous team. I think I said this is a team that is set up to make a move at the deadline, Marcus, that's going to put them over the hill. A team, if they could trade for another scoring winger, I think, on that team, or maybe a scoring winner and like a nice, maybe 4th line center or something like that. I mean, this is a team that could definitely threaten down the stretch. So they are primed to set up something at the trade deadline. I think they'll be in it. And then they can do something that's going to push them over the hall a little bit. So I'm excited for Minnesota this year. I actually think it's going to be one of the better Minnesota teams in recent memory. They've always been that team that kind of just gets into the first round of the playoffs and loses. But like you said, I think they could definitely do some damage down the stretch.
Just over $2 million in cap space, too, which will help them a lot as they try to acquire potential players. You mentioned them as a potential trading team. I'm looking at guys who are on expiring contracts right now that could get traded. I don't know what you think of Montreal. I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team, but Alex Radulov is expired after this year. Guy in their division that could be a good fit at the deadline. They want to improve scoring depth, add a veteran presence. Jerome Iginla.
Yeah, I saw that before. I think Iginla's still surprisingly been productive. If he has another season like the past 2, Add Iginla down the stretch, kind of give him one last shot at glory sort of thing. I think that'd be a nice addition for Minnesota for sure. We move up the ranks here. So Minnesota there at the 4th spot. And the team that left Minnesota many years ago, the Dallas Stars in the 3 spot there. Dallas, once again, a team that we want to love so much, but their defense and goaltending is still such a liability. They won the division last year, and good for them, and we're proud of them for it, but I don't know if they could score that sustainability again like they did last year. I said, 267 goals for, only 230 against. So, they had the 3rd most goals against in the division, but they had by far the most goals for in that division. Can they do it again? We know they're stacked up front with Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn, Patrick Sharp, Jason Spezza, who's a great little player. Alex Hemsky had a nice little year. Guys like Yuri Hudler added in, Cody Eakin. And then you look at their defense, and it is a substantial drop-off. John Klingberg, one of the best number ones in the league. We're big fans of him. He's on a great contract. After that, though, it's still a mess. Johnny Oduya.
Yeah, those are nice pieces, I think.
Yeah, Johnny Oduya, older player. I think Danny Amos is an okay guy there. You got Jordy Ben and whatnot. I still think they need another guy in the back end. We talked about how, and another team in the division wound up stealing them, how Brian Campbell would have been a really nice fit for that high-pace offense. They lose out on him. James Wisniewski, Marcus, just got cut from his PTO in Tampa. I still think he can move the puck well. I would wonder if they would consider bringing him in. I think he'd be a nice fit in Dallas there. That could work out. But then maybe the worst in even their defense, Marcus, is their goaltending, which has let them down. They have 2 terrible contracts on the back end with Niemi and Lettinen. They still as crazy as it seems like forever. They still both have 2 years left on those contracts. I'm always sitting when the hell are those things up? Similar to how Brian Campbell was for years there. 5.9 for this year and next for Kari Lettinen, 4.5 for Niemi. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't buy one out and suck it up this summer and then maybe make a run at, say, a Brian Elliott. I think that would have made sense. Maybe a trade partner with, we talked about Marc-Andre Fleury or Ben Bishop. Marcus, do they have to trade for a goalie no matter what?
Whether it's this season, if they want to win this season, they have to. And if it's not this season, it's got to be next season, going into the offseason. Look, I think this team, I think they're going to take a step back too. I think the scoring will be there, but I think they've taken a step back, not only on the blue line, but also up front. Jason Demers and Alex Goligoski were important players for them last season. They're both gone. You bring in Dan Hamhuis, but you're really only replacing one of those defensemen. They do have some talented guys in their system. Esa Lindell, who played for Finland at the World Cup of Hockey, played for the Texas Stars all of last season, was a high-scoring offensive defenseman there. But, they've just had terrible injury luck up front. Tyler Seguin hurt to start the year. Jamie Benn hurt to start the year. Matthias Janmark out 5 to 6 months, and his entire career could be in jeopardy if he doesn't recover from what sounds like a very serious joint disorder that's genetic. Val Nichushkin is now in the KHL. If they want to be as good as they were last season, it is imperative for them to get goaltending. Last year, they could afford it. They had some good depth on the blue line. They had depth up front. They didn't need the goaltending. This year, if they want to have success in that loaded Central Division, they are going to need goaltending. I can't see them getting past the second round, let alone the first, with their current goaltending situation. And, Nichushkin's loss is going to hurt. Janmark, 5 to 6 months. That's a minimum requirement. And then they said it's an 80% chance of full recovery. He's one of their young, exciting players. If I was a Dallas fan, I'd be very worried about the team this season because I think them and St. Louis will take the biggest step backs in this division.
Yeah, easily. I still think they got the scoring depth to be excited. Like you said, I think Minnesota's improved enough that they're really going to challenge for that 3rd spot. And if you wonder if Steve Yzerman's sitting there licking his chops in Tampa Bay, waiting to snag some young star off Dallas because they desperately need the goalie. And Ben Bishop looks like he could be the guy. Marc-Andre Fleury there as well. They need to do something. I said, I'm surprised. They frankly just should have gotten rid of a goalie, even if it meant giving up, a 3rd or 2nd round pick just to get rid of a goalie. Yeah, honestly, it's so bad that you have to do it. I don't see either one of them stepping up. This team desperately needs defense, and they need goaltending. Now, they do have $5 million plus in cap space, Marcus, which, of course, compared to the salary cap, that's an escrow, so the percentages change as the season goes on. So by the trade deadline, they can wind up taking a significant contract down the line. They're going to need it. You hope they can hang on. You hope that, Ben and Sagan recover nicely and don't have to miss any significant time. But God forbid they do, Marcus, this could turn ugly for Dallas very quickly.
You said they have just over $5 million in cap space?
Yeah, according to General Fanager.
5.95 is the hit for Ben Bishop. We'll talk about another team in a future division preview who I think could be a very good fit for Ben Bishop. Hasn't been talked about as a fit, but very well could be. I think Dallas, more than anybody, needs Ben Bishop.
Need him. Yeah, they need him desperately.
Or Marc-Andre Fleury, whichever one. But
yeah, whoever comes first. Yeah, exactly. So we got Dallas dropping off from first down to third. We got the team finishing seconds. They always seem to be in it. They took a lot of hurt this year, I think, Marcus, even maybe more so than usual. Salary cap error does it to you. It's the Chicago Blackhawks in second place here. It's hard to pick against the Hawks, the success they have. They still got Kane. They still got Taves. They now got Panarin. Corey Crawford had a really nice season last year. But they lose some depth, of course. I mean, Andrew Shaw's a guy they lose there.
Teuvo Teravainen as well.
Teuvo Teravainen they're forced to part ways with because they weren't going to be able to afford to keep him. The year before they lose Brendan Saad, we talked about in the past. I still think they're going to be good. You wonder if Hosa's ever going to drop off. It seems like he's not. He's been so good. He was great in the World Cup of Hockey as well, so you hope he could still be sustainable. Artem Anisimov's been nice for them. You need guys to step up, and after that, they have a lot of money invested in a few guys, and it really drops off. Brent Seabrook, we're happy. Brian Campbell, we thought that was a good fit, definitely in Chicago. I think that's a nice fit for him. That'll help them on the back end.
Definitely solidifies their blue line, I think.
Yeah, Hjalmarsson's still a good player. Brent Seabrook, who's still capable, but that contract's going to be very bad soon. You wonder how much he's really going to have, how long he could sustain what he's been doing in the past. Trevor Van Riemsdyk, New Jersey native. Michael Roosevelt's still there. And then Crawford and Ned. I think they still got a decent core there, obviously, Marcus. I think they're always going to be a threat when you got, frankly, Taves, Kane, Keith, and Crawford. I think those guys keep you in it always. They still got a great coach in Joel Quenneville. You wonder just the scoring depth is, I don't think you can expect 101 or 2 points from Kane again to where he's going to make up for the loss of other players down the line. But they're still going to be a threat. They're still Chicago. And if, they made it to the second or conference finals again, it probably wouldn't surprise any of us.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for them, more so than a lot of other teams, is that their division, other than one other team who we'll talk about next probably, really didn't do a ton to solidify themselves instead of them.
Exactly.
The gap between them and Minnesota I thought was too big. St. Louis and Dallas both got worse. I think this Brian Campbell acquisition is one of the best signings of the offseason. I think he's really going to solidify their blue line. So is Michal Kempny. I think the young Czech defender, he's 26 years old, played for the Czechs at the World Cup of Hockey. He's gotten some favorable comparisons to Johnny Oduya from Stan Bowman and from the Blackhawks brass. They like his two-way game. If Kempny can just be solid, I think that'll be as big as anything, because I think if he can supplant Roosevelt and Van Riemsdyk, they'll have a really nice 1 through 6, and then you'll have some good defensive depth, maybe sitting in the stands too. Seabrook and Keith, you wonder if the step back is going to happen this year. I worry about Seabrook more than I do Keith, but they're so good. And I think a player that doesn't get a lot of credit because of how good his team is in front of him is Corey Crawford. I think he's at least a top 10 goalie in my eyes, if not higher. And, you have a goalie like that, he can certainly help you. I think they're going to be second in this division. They're going to challenge. I expect them to make the semifinals. I could see them in the conference finals, but I don't see them. I don't think that they're not at a lock unless they make some changes. And we've seen Stan Bowman do it before, so maybe he can bring in some pieces. He always seems to find a way. Jerome McGinley would be a pretty nice fit there.
Cap space is the issue with them right now. Exactly. They don't have much to work with. Yeah, exactly. That's their biggest enemy right now. I mean, you can't blame them for locking up Taze and Kane the way they did. And I said the Seabrook one is the one that hurts them the most right now, for sure. Easily down the line. So that means, Marcus, we have a new winner of the Central Division here, a team we were high on last year. They had a nice little postseason run, and a team we think is going to be even better this year with a new beautiful face on that blue line and PK on. The Nashville Predators, Music City turning into a hockey city, man, there. Smashville had a good year last year. I think surprised some people going to the second round there. I think they have a pretty good young core, Marcus, that frankly is now only younger and better with PK Subban on the team. They have maybe the best blue line in the NHL. You can make the argument. If not, they're top 3 or 5, to say the least. PK Subban and Roman Josi, I mean, I don't know if you could dream up a better top pair than that. I mean, that's the stuff of my dreams, or any NHL nerd like us two would have in our visions. Matthias Ekholm, 26 years old, Ryan Ellis. I mean, that's your top 4 right there. I mean, that is a great, solid, as maybe the best top 4 in hockey. And then you got guys like Matthew Carlisle, Anthony Bieto, and Yannick Weber to wrap that up. I don't know if I haven't seen it yet, but I really hope Yannick Weber wears number 6, because I think it would be
That'd be awesome.
It'd be such a great troll, but it'd be funny. And then, of course, up front, I mean, new captain, Mr. Carey Underwood himself. Mike Fisher has always had a good career there. Philip Forsberg, James Neal, Ryan Johansson, Colin Wilson. Marcus, just they don't really have any weak spots except for maybe in the crease, where we wonder if Pekka Rinne could rebound.
That's the biggest question, I think, Rinne. But I look at the guys in front of Rinne, and this was the second best score and venue adjusted puck possession team last season, and now they're replacing Shea Weber with PK Subban. I think the sky's the limit for this Nashville team. I think that on paper, they are the best team in the Western Conference. They're my pick to come out of the West to make it in the Stanley Cup final. This team is going to be a lot of fun, and they're going to be really good. They were fun last season. I think, we've talked it to death. We've done it on multiple shows, but the PK Subban acquisition for them really cannot be overstated. How important it is, or how much it puts them over the top potentially. Now, there is a big question in the crease, and that's Pekka Rinne. Over the last 3 seasons, his even strength save percentage has fluctuated. It was at .902, which was a career low, down from .928 in limited action the year before, up to .933 in 2014-15, back down to .916 at even strength. That .916 or .902 at even strength is not going to cut it with a team this good. We saw how bad goaltending can undermine a division champion last year with the Dallas Stars. I don't see Rinne being as bad as Niemi or Lehtinen were, but if this decline continues, I'm not saying that Nashville is going to trade for a goalie, because there's a lot
I think there's a possibility. Absolutely, they could.
You think there is?
I think there is. I think you look at Bishop and Fleury, especially because they're on expiring contracts. If Nashville decided, you know what, screw this, we're going for it, and all of a sudden they're in second place or first place down the stretch, even with a shaky pick, Pekka Rinne, I think there's no reason they shouldn't be going to, especially with the top 2 guys we keep mentioning, and Fleury and Bishop. They're in the Eastern Conference. I think they would have no problem finding trading partners in either one of those teams. I think they could pull it off. Now,
take on Bishop's salary right now. They could.
Oh yeah, they could. Now. They got the space. They have $6 million in cap space. They have a few. They're gonna have to sign probably a few more depth guys. They got 41 men on the roster right now, so we'll see who makes their team out of camp. Kevin Fiala is a young left wing, first round pick. He's a good player. You wonder if he can maybe make the team there.
He's having a good camp so far.
Yeah, he's had a good camp. I've seen a little bit of I watched a little bit of the game the other day. He seems to be having a good camp. I'm a fan of his. I wonder if he'll make the team. That's the kind of depth you need if they're going to be able to make a move at the deadline to get a young entry-level contract in there. Do they make a move for a goalie? I think is a distinct possibility. I think we'll see how Pekka Rinne. I mean, listen, I think they're going to give Pekka Rinne the benefit of the doubt. I think they're so good on the blue line and up front that they could protect him in a way and really minimize the high-quality chances he faces against. But down the stretch, I think the Nationals management is smart enough to understand that they may have an issue. And I think it's definitely something that could be flirted with down towards the trade deadline.
Well, look, they've shown that they will trade a franchise legend or unseat a franchise legend if it gets them the better player. And, you and I, our thoughts on PK Subban are clear. I think he's been a better defenseman than Shea Weber for the last 2 or 3 seasons. I think he's going to be a better defenseman than Shea Weber. And if they can mask Rinne, that's big. But I did not, I'll be completely honest. The cap space with them didn't really entertain the possibility. But I look at that and, they certainly have the young pieces. They've got a pretty deep farm system. If I'm Steve Yzerman, I might be calling them about trading Ben Bishop. Now, the only issue is if you're Yzerman is you're strengthening a team that you could conceivably see in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
What kind of a storyline would that be? But
that'd be fun.
That's a great point about Poyle. He's gonna cut bait on these guys if he needs to. Like, he understands the contribution Weber made to the team and made to Nashville, and I'm sure understands about Rinne. But wow, I just had all kinds of visions of Ben Bishop in net for Nashville, and you can't really envision a better NHL team than that, can you?
Yeah, that'd be as good as it gets from Nashville down the stretch here, Marcus. So once again, we'll go through it here. We had Jets at 7, Avs at 6, and then the next 5 teams making the playoffs with 4 and 5 slipping into the wild card, and St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas, Hawks at 2, Predators, the Nashville Predators of Smashville there, finishing at number 1 for our Central Division there, Marcus. Any hot takes here, or maybe even breakout players we should be looking for in this division down the stretch?
Breakout players. You got to be watching Patrick Laine. I think he's the obvious.
Yeah, I think he's probably the obvious one there. Yeah,
I think he's got a very good chance of winning Rookie of the Year. Although Austin Matthews has looked really, really good. I think Laine is going to be fun. New players. Obviously, I think the player to watch though in the division is PK Subban. I'm so upset that he's now in the Western Conference. Speaking in the Sharks fan in me, speaking that way. The impartial journalist in me, though, is very happy that, I have a chance to watch PK Subban a little more than I might have when he was with Montreal. I think he's a player to watch. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder this season. I think he's going to win the Norris Trophy. I think he's
nice.
I think he's going to have a very, very good season, and he's going to be surrounded by good players. That blue line in Nashville, I think, is as good as it gets in the National Hockey League. Also on Nashville, looking at Philip Forsberg too. I think, a young player who's had some very strong seasons recently. I think he could maybe take that quote unquote next step this season. In terms of the rest of the division, I'm kind of intrigued to see Eric Staal in Minnesota, more so just because he'll be in a new conference. He was on the Rangers down the stretch last season, but this is the first real departure for him, I think, from Carolina. I'm interested to see that. Also interested to see Artemi Panarin. How does he adjust in his second NHL season? And do the Blackhawks separate him and Kane? I think that I don't really see the point of them doing that. Maybe if it's to spread scoring depth, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of other breakout players.
I think he's already kind of established himself, but someone who could maybe take his game to the next level as well, and maybe jump on the more of the national scene is Colton Parayko in St. Louis. He's already a fantastic young hockey player. And I was going to say Forsberg, maybe, putting up even more points this year on an even better team in Nashville. But yeah, I think Parayko's got a chance to really establish himself and honestly make the eventual loss of Kevin Shattenkirk a bit of a pill that's easier to swallow for St. Louis on the blue line.
Agreed.
Invest that money into Colton Parayko at 23 years old. It's going to be a better long-term investment. You could lock him up, eat up some of those RFA years away from him, and a couple of UFAs as well. So I think he's a guy to look in. And then, Patrick Laine, I think, is the obvious pick on a young Winnipeg team. Marcus, this division, couple teams that could use some goaltending, could be some interesting trades down the line of this division. Some good shakeups. I think you should be excited for it. We're going into the Central. Central Division is going to be a fun one to watch, folks. I think you definitely got to keep an eye on it if you have time to.
I think Ben Bishop better start getting used to the Midwest and the Southwest, because I think that's where he has a very good chance of ending up at the trade deadline.
Absolutely here. Before we wrap up here, Marcus, we'll touch on it just briefly here. Of course, we talked about Jacob Trouba requesting a trade this past week. 22 years old. He's currently an unsigned RFA. with the Winnipeg Jets. We're big fans of him, and he's already established himself with a pretty good NHL career. Once again, he's only 22 for crying out loud. He seems to be slated. Another team that's very concerned about the righty-lefty thing on the blue line, which I still just don't understand. It's not that big of a deal, I don't think. But they want to play on the right. He's more comfortable on the left. Blah blah blah. Anyway, issues with management, not signed, looking to get moved. Every team should probably be knocking right now. Bob McKenzie has spoken about a couple teams. Boston's kicked the tires. Toronto apparently is kicking the tires a bit. The Rangers are in on that too. I think a lot of teams are probably going to be on him. Does he get moved, Marcus? Is this a holdout that maybe carries for a while into the season? We could see something like that might happen. What do you think going down the line?
Winnipeg could ease this in one fell swoop, based on what he said, in my opinion, and that's just giving him more ice time. You know, he feels like he's caught behind Tyler Myers and Dustin Buffwood on the depth chart. I'm trying to find his time on ice from last season, but he should be getting top 4 minutes on this team. And, I think you could use, I don't know if he's comfortable playing on the left as he is on the right. I know he played on the right for Team North America at the World Cup where he looked really, really strong. I mean, if you're Paul Maurice, maybe this isn't the way to go about doing it, but shouldn't he have had a bigger role than Tyler Myers to begin with? That being said, teams that I think could, make a trade for him. I think Buffalo has said they will not trade Ristolainen for him. I could see that being a potential swap. I think the quickest way he gets traded is for another RFA. And I think a lot of these teams have said they don't have an interest in doing that, but I think that's really the only way we see it happen. I don't think a team's going to offer sheet him. We
can talk about all the time, like how this is the perfect time to just screw over Winnipeg.
And a critical reason why he might not accept it offer sheet is because Winnipeg could match it. And if he really doesn't want to stay in Winnipeg, Travis Hamonic was floated out when Hamonic had a trade request. I don't think Hamonic wants to leave the Islanders, but if you're the Islanders, you probably at least ask if Winnipeg's willing to do that. I don't see an obvious fit for him right now, just given how close we are to the start of the season. I think this holdout could go pretty long, but I think, like we saw with Jonathan Drouin last season, I have a feeling this ends with him as a Winnipeg Jet because he realizes that, a holdout is only hurting him, and then something will happen where he's going to get more of a role and all will be resolved. We saw it with Drouin last season. He held out. He wouldn't go to Syracuse. Then he went to Syracuse. And then, lo and behold, there were injuries to the Lightning. Lo and behold, Jonathan Drouin plays for the Lightning and is great down the stretch and in the postseason and is on the precipice of having a monster campaign. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Trouba. I don't see an obvious fit for him right now.
Yeah, it's going to be tough there, and the RFA things makes it even a little bit more sticky. The CBA, the agreement there is he has till December 1st as an RFA is what he could sign. After December 1st, he would actually have to sit out the entire season. So,
really?
Yes. So if that was the case, he'd have to have a contract, whether it was with another team that he was traded to or with the Winnipeg Jets. We'll see what happens there. Could be a fun situation to check out here.
Could you imagine if this ends with him playing in Europe for the season? Like he sits out until December and then he plays in like Switzerland or something, or the KHL. God, that'd be crazy. I'm not rooting for that because he's a good NHL player, but that'd be pretty anarchistic at least.
Yeah, I'm sure the NHLPA would just be like psyched, sticking it to the man there, sort of thing. So I don't know how it's going to go here, Marcus. But anyway, I think we've done a good job here with our predictions. As always, they will be completely accurate. You could put house money on it.
Yep.
Sell cars, get all that cash. Just
of course, if you lose money from our predictions, it won't be our fault, but the fault of the system.
There's variables we can't take into effect. But if we're right, we take full credit, of
course. Full credit. Then it's all our
control. We'll look to aim for maybe a couple days from now, maybe 2 or 3 days from now. We'll hit up another one. Haven't even decided. Maybe we'll let the fans decide, Marcus. What do you guys want to see next? If you're watching,
we could put that up to the poll.
Whatever division you want to see next, definitely ask us. Tweet at the Puckleheads Facebook page, or if you really just want to be lazy and text me or Marcus because you have our numbers, that's fine too. But do it via social media. It makes us look better, folks.
Looks legit.
Yeah, for the Puckleheads here, for Marcus White on the West Coast, Conall McNeil is here on the East Coast. We love you guys. Go watch some preseason hockey. Have fun tonight. Stay safe out there.
See you guys soon.